Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you were at war instead of at work? Like you went in hoping to understand, but came out more confused, or worse, wounded? That is not because people are bad communicators. It is because people are scared. And when people are scared, they get defensive. Not always in obvious ways. Sometimes it sounds like I did not mean it like that. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is sarcasm. But underneath it all is the same thing. A nervous system trying to protect itself, a heart trying not to be hurt again. Defensiveness is not weakness. It is instinct. It shows up the moment we feel accused or misunderstood. It rushes in to build a wall between our intention and their perception. But here is the cost. That wall does not just keep others out, it keeps us in. And when you cannot let words in, you cannot grow, you cannot learn, you cannot love. Because relationships do not grow in a battlefield. They grow in a garden, and that takes safety. So the question is not, how do I win? The real question is, how do I stay open when I feel attacked? How do I stay grounded when my emotions want to run? How do I hear someone fully without needing to defend my entire existence? That is what this journey is about. It is not about changing who you are. It is about understanding why you react the way you do and learning how to lead yourself through that moment. Because here is the truth. The most powerful people in the room are not the loudest. They are the ones who know how to stay present in the face of pressure. The ones who can hear criticism without collapsing. The ones who can receive feedback and still protect their peace. That takes practice. It takes awareness. But most of all, it takes courage. The courage to be seen without putting up a shield. So if you are tired of the same arguments, the same misunderstandings, the same moments where your defenses rise faster than your clarity, this is where we start. Not with blame, not with guilt, but with ownership. And that is where everything begins to shift. Before you judge yourself for being defensive, understand this. Your brain is not wired for harmony. It is wired for survival. Long before you learned language or reason, your nervous system learned what danger felt like. It learned to detect tone. It learned to respond to sudden shifts in volume, in energy, in facial expression. That system has not evolved much. It still believes that every disagreement could be a threat, not just to your opinion, but to your worth, your belonging, your safety. This is not weakness, this is wiring. That tension you feel in your chest when someone questions your judgment. That urge to interrupt when someone misunderstands your intent. That instant need to justify or explain before they even finish their sentence. It is not a flaw in your character, it is a protective reflex. Your body trying to defend what it believes is under attack. But the problem is, not every hard conversation is a war. Not every disagreement is dangerous. And when we respond to discomfort as if it were danger, we bring armor to a moment that actually needs vulnerability. You see, there is a difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic. It is your nervous system saying, I know this pattern and I will protect you. But responding requires presence. It asks you to pause between the feeling and the reply. It asks you to breathe where your body wants to brace. It asks you to choose intention over instinct. That space between stimulus and response is where growth lives. And most people never go there, not because they do not want to, but because they were never taught how. Think back to when you were young. How were conflict and correction handled? Were you punished for being wrong? Were you ridiculed for not knowing? Were you ignored when you spoke your truth? Those moments do not disappear. They shape how we show up today. They teach us that mistakes are dangerous, that being misunderstood is a threat. So we build walls, we sharpen our words. We get louder, colder, faster, all in the name of protection. But in doing so, we lose the very thing we are trying to guard, connection. Defensiveness is the opposite of curiosity. And when you lose curiosity, you stop listening. When you stop listening, you stop learning. And when you stop learning, you repeat the same conversations, the same arguments, the same fractures over and over. Not because you are broken, but because your brain is doing what it was trained to do. Stay safe, even if it means staying stuck. So what do we do with this? First, we stop blaming ourselves for the impulse. That impulse is human, but we do not have to let it lead. We begin by noticing it. Where does it show up in your body? What kinds of words trigger it? Whose voice brings it out of you? And once you notice it, you get to name it. You get to say silently, I feel defensive right now. That simple naming begins to loosen its grip. It reminds you that you have a choice, that this moment does not need to become a pattern. Because leadership is not about never being triggered. It is about knowing when you are and choosing who you want to be anyway. Your reaction is not your identity. And your first impulse does not need to be your final word. The hardest time to think clearly is when you feel misunderstood. And the most dangerous moment in any conversation is not when someone criticizes you. It is when your ego tries to protect you. That is when you lose your center. That is when the need to be right becomes louder than the need to be wise. If you want to grow through those moments instead of react to them, you need practices that are simple enough to remember and strong enough to hold you when emotions rise. The first practice is naming. When you feel your body tighten, when your breath gets shallow, when your inner voice gets loud and fast, do not suppress it, acknowledge it. Silently say to yourself, I feel defensive right now. That phrase does not excuse your feelings, it illuminates them. The act of naming turns a blur of emotion into something you can observe. And the moment you observe it, you are no longer trapped in it, you are above it. And from there, you can choose. The second practice is breath. Not the kind you rush through to check a mindfulness box, the kind that brings you back into your body. When your mind wants to escape the moment, let your breath become the anchor. Inhale deeply for 4 counts, hold it for 2, exhale slowly for 6. Do this twice before you speak. It does not make you weak, it makes you stable. Because every word that follows a steady breath carries more power than 10 shouted from a storm. The third practice is posture. Your body often communicates before your mouth does. When you lean forward aggressively, cross your arms, raise your shoulders, or clench your jaw, you tell the room, I am not safe right now. You tell your own nervous system that you are preparing for a fight. Instead, ground your feet, relax your hands, drop your shoulders, soften your eyes. This is not about appearing calm. It is about becoming calm. Because when your body feels safe, your voice follows. The fourth practice is permission. Give yourself permission to pause, to not have the perfect response, to say, I need a moment, or I want to understand you clearly, so let me take a breath first. These phrases do not make you look uncertain. They make you look intentional. People who rush to respond often sound reactive. People who allow space before they speak often sound wise. The space does not create weakness. It creates depth. The fifth practice is reframing. Instead of asking yourself, why are they attacking me? Ask what might be happening beneath their tone. Instead of thinking they are trying to make me feel small, ask what might they be feeling inside themselves. Reframing does not justify their behavior. It expands your understanding. And when you understand more, you take things less personally. And when you take things less personally, you create space for a stronger self. The sixth practice is detachment. Not detachment from people, detachment from identity. You are not your ideas. You are not your mistakes. You are not every comment someone makes about your work or your words or your worth. The more you attach your value to being right, the more you will crumble when you are challenged. But when your identity is grounded in growth, you stop needing every conversation to validate you. And that is when you become unshakable. The final practice is choosing impact over impulse. Every time you respond to a moment, ask yourself, what impact do I want to leave behind? Do I want to be remembered for my sharpness or my steadiness? Do I want to escalate the emotion or elevate the conversation? That one question can redirect your whole tone, because it reminds you that power is not in control, it is in presence. These practices are not for those who want to win arguments. They are for those who want to build something that lasts. Trust, respect, growth. and most of all, peace. You will not get them by being the loudest. You will earn them by being the clearest. Words are not just sounds, they are signals. They can disarm or provoke. They can invite openness or trigger resistance. And in difficult conversations, the words you choose become the difference between a wall and a window. You cannot control how someone will respond, but you can control whether your language fuels the fire or calms the storm. And often that begins with one word, you. When someone feels attacked, it usually starts with a sentence that begins with you. You never listen. You always interrupt. You made me feel worthless. These statements are not only loaded with accusation, they are filled with assumption. They do not leave space for dialogue. They close the door before the other person even gets a chance to step in. Because when you say you, what the other person hears is judgment. And when people feel judged, they do not open up, they shut down, they defend. So how do you speak the truth without making the other person your target? You shift the spotlight from them to you, not to center yourself, but to own your experience. Instead of saying you never listen, say I feel unheard when I speak and do not get a response. Instead of you always interrupt me, try I lose my train of thought when I get cut off. The difference may seem small, but the impact is everything. One version blames, the other reveals. One triggers defense, the other invites understanding. Changing your language is not about being polite, it is about being effective. It is not about softening the truth. It is about delivering it in a way that lands with clarity, not conflict. When you use I instead of you create space for conversation instead of confrontation. And in that space, something powerful happens. People stop bracing themselves and start listening. They stop defending themselves and start reflecting. But it is not just about pronouns, it is about tone. If your tone says, I am here to punish, your words will never heal. If your energy says, I have already decided who you are, nothing you say will sound fair. Even the most carefully crafted words will fall flat if your posture screams blame. So before you speak, check your intention. Are you trying to connect or control? Are you speaking from clarity or from woundedness? Because words spoken from a place of fear often become weapons. But words spoken from awareness become tools. Another simple but powerful shift is to use questions instead of accusations. Instead of saying, why are you always late? Ask, is there something making it hard for you to arrive on time? Instead of, why do you ignore my messages? Ask, is now a bad time for this conversation? Questions open doors. Accusations close them. And when you start with curiosity instead of condemnation, you create an atmosphere where people feel safe enough to tell the truth. It also helps to replace absolutes with specifics. Words like always and never are rarely accurate and always inflammatory. They make people feel like they're being defined by their worst moment. Instead of saying, you never show up for me, say, last week when I needed help, I felt alone. Be precise, be grounded, be honest without exaggeration. Because the more precise you are, the harder it is for someone to dismiss what you feel. Lastly, speak to what you want, not just what went wrong. It is easy to list what hurt. It takes more courage to describe what healing could look like. Instead of focusing on everything they failed to do, name what would help rebuild trust. Instead of recounting the entire history of what went wrong, point toward what could be different next time. When you name what you want, you give the other person a roadmap. You give them a chance to meet you there. Communication is not just about saying what you mean. It is about saying it in a way that can be received. And that begins not with being louder, but with being wiser. The next time you are in a hard conversation, ask yourself this simple question. Is my language building a bridge or a barrier? If it is a barrier, you still have time to change direction. And if it is a bridge, you are already leading from strength. There are moments in conversation when everything tightens, hearts race, voices rise, eyes narrow, not because people are cruel, but because they are afraid. Afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of being seen as weak, afraid of not being heard. And in those moments, a few simple phrases can shift the entire atmosphere. Not because they fix the problem, but because they soften the ground where healing can begin. The first phrase is, I want to understand. It tells the other person, you are not here to fight. You are here to learn. It disarms tension without demanding agreement, because the truth is, most people do not need you to agree with them. They need to know you care enough to listen. When someone hears, I want to understand, they are more likely to slow down, to explain instead of defend, to connect instead of shut down. The second phrase is, I hear you. And not in a dismissive way, but in a way that reflects attention. Because hearing is not about agreeing, it is about acknowledging. And acknowledgement is oxygen for trust. People do not need every word repeated, but they do need to feel felt. A simple I hear you, followed by a short reflection of what they said, often has more power than a long explanation. The third phrase is, I can see why you would feel that way. It does not mean you are admitting fault. It means you are recognizing their humanity. This phrase creates safety. It says your emotions make sense even if we see things differently. And when people feel safe, they become more honest, more open, more human. The fourth phrase is, what do you need from me right now? Not what do you want me to do, but what do you need? This question shifts the dynamic from reaction to response. It shows presence. It shows maturity. It tells the other person you are not here to fix or argue or prove. You are here to serve the relationship. The fifth phrase is, I'm open to being wrong. Most people walk into conflict with their guard up. But this phrase takes the armor off. It creates space for new perspective. It shows that you are not here to protect your ego, but to protect the connection. And when one person lays their ego down, it often gives permission for the other to do the same. The last phrase is, I care about this and I care about you. Say it when the conversation feels heavy. Say it when the topic gets tough. Say it when emotions rise. Because in the end, no one remembers every word you said, but they will remember how safe they felt with you. And sometimes that one sentence is all they need to stay open. Language can wound, but it can also mend. And when you speak with intention, with humility, with care, your words stop being weapons and start becoming bridges. You do not need perfect phrasing. You need honest presence. Because what heals people is not your strategy, it is your sincerity. When someone offends you, your nervous system does not ask for permission, it acts. Your heart beats faster, your jaw tightens. Your mind starts drafting replies before the other person even finishes their sentence. And if you are not careful, your reaction will become louder than your values. You will say things you do not mean. You will protect your pride but lose your presence. That is why you need to practice the pause. The pause is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the space between what happened and what you choose to do next. And in that space, everything can shift. Before you speak, breathe. Breathe like your peace depends on it, because it does. One breath reminds your brain that you are not in danger, that you are not here to fight, that you are here to respond, not to explode. And then name it, not to the other person, to yourself. Say silently, I feel insulted, or that landed hard, or this feels unfair. Naming is grounding. It keeps you from being consumed by the moment. It gives you perspective, and perspective gives you power. Once you have space, choose the direction. There are always at least two. One is reaction. It feels good for a moment, but leaves damage behind. The other is response. It is slower, more deliberate, more rooted, and it builds something stronger than a comeback. It builds your character. A response could sound like, I want to be honest, what you just said hit me hard. It could sound like, I am not sure how to continue this conversation with the tone we are using. It could sound like, I care about this, but I also want to feel respected while we talk. These statements do not attack, they anchor. They do not shame the other person. They express your experience with clarity and maturity. But what if the other person is intentionally trying to provoke you? Then you are not just managing emotion, you are protecting your energy. In that case, you still pause, you still name, but you also decide whether this conversation is worth your effort. Sometimes the most powerful response is not silence, but boundaries. Saying, I am not going to continue this if it stays disrespectful is not weakness. It is self-leadership. And if you walk away, do it with grace, not to win, but to preserve your peace. You do not need to have the last word. You just need to have the last sense of self. People will test you, offend you, try to pull you into their chaos. But your job is not to match their energy. Your job is to lead with yours. The more you practice this, the stronger you become. Not louder, stronger. Because strength is not in the punch. It is in the pause. It is not in what you say to hurt them. It is in what you say to protect who you are. You do not need to be perfect to be powerful. You just need to be aware. Every time you choose to respond instead of react, you take back control. Every time you pause, you create space for strength. And every time you speak with intention, you become the kind of person others feel safe around. This is not about never being triggered. It is about what you do after. It is about turning emotion into presence, pain into clarity, frustration into leadership. That is the journey of emotional maturity. Not loud, not flashy, but grounded, quietly unshakable. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to carry it with you. Share it with someone who needs the reminder. And if you want more tools like this to build unshakable inner confidence and communication that heals instead of harms, subscribe to this channel. This is daily 1% impact. And we are here to grow one choice, one moment, one breath at a time. Because your power is not in how loud you speak. It is in how well you lead yourself when no one else is watching. And that begins today.